Welcome to Follow Me to the MROP, a podcast dedicated to the journey of the masculine soul and the transformative power of initiation. My name is Brian Mueller. I live in suburban Dayton, Ohio, and I made my rites at Pilgrim Park in Illinois in 2014. I'm your host, and in each episode of our show, I'll sit down with one man who has made his rites, and I'll invite him to tell his story. This won't be an abstract explanation or a theological lecture, just a real conversation about what it was like to cross that threshold at the rites and what changed afterward. Before we begin, a quick word of gratitude. This podcast is brought to you by Choosing Presence. We believe that the greatest gift a man can give his community is his own presence. In a world of constant distraction, Choosing Presence provides the tools to help you stay grounded in the now. If you'd like an easy way to begin learning about the practice of presence, you can download the free Practicing Presence app at choosingpresence.org/app. Now, the Men's Rites of Passage, or MROP, is an experience designed to help men move from the first half of life into the second, shifting from a focus on ego and achievement to a life of meaning and soul. On this show, we just don't talk about the rites in theory, we talk to the men who have walked the path. Today, we are joined by a man who has made his rites, and we're going to hear exactly what that journey looked like for him. My guest today is Rich Gierak. Brother, I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for making the time and for being willing to share your story.
You bet, Brian. Glad to be here.
Rich, tell us where you're from and how you spend your time these days.
So I live in Northern California. I was born in a city named Concord, just about 30 miles east of San Francisco. Most of my life in and around the Bay Area. I now live up in the mountains in the Sierras. And yeah.
Great. Now let's dive in and talk about the Men's Rites of Passage. The MROP is a unique experience. It's not a retreat or a workshop. It's an initiation. Many men arrive at the rites at a crossroads in their lives, looking for something they can't quite name. Before we dive into the why and the how, let's start at the very beginning. When and where did you make your rites?
I made my rites in 2006 at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico.
And do you recall who the weaver was and how many men were there?
Yeah. Richard Rohr was our weaver, and there were 120 men making their rites that week. And I was on the waiting list for almost a year before leading up to that experience, but got in.
So when you think back to that weekend, what's the first image or feeling that comes forth?
For me, there was a lot of experience. Not a lot of talking, but a lot of experience is really what impacted me. The MROP was not a place where I was told about things. It's a place where I experienced different ways of perceiving just my own journey.
Was there a particular image or something that comes to mind, though, from that weekend, or a feeling that was really powerful for you, overwhelming from that time?
Probably the land there was a very strong image for me of the time spent out in the wilderness. Really wonderful.
It was high desert, right?
Yeah, high desert, northwestern New Mexico.
And in general terms, what was the entire weekend like for you? How would you characterize the weekend?
It was life-changing for me. It really was. I had a 3-day ride home where I began to try to unpack and understand the experience, which was just wonderful. And I'm now, like 20 years later, still working to integrate that whole experience into my life and to make it also to help other men have similar experiences.
Without sharing something that may be too confidential, is there a story? Is there an interaction with one of the men, a ritual or something that really grabbed you that weekend that you can recall?
There was, and it was deeply impactful. A ritual that involved all the men present and kind of got down beneath the covers, down beneath the surface and into, deeper places in my story and my life and stirred some things up.
Now, you said you were on a waiting list for about a year to participate in this rites, but going back to that time that was leading up to your rites, what were the circumstances that both led to your decision to participate and what was going on in your life at that time?
So at the time, I was actually in formation to become clergy in a church. And it was all well and fine, and I was learning a lot there, and my experience in that environment was good. But, it still didn't really speak to me as a man. What led me to the MROP was a friend of mine had given me one of Richard Rohr's books on a retreat in 2004. And I brought it home, put it on the shelf. in 2005, this was an annual weekend men's retreat for the men of our church. And, we always had clergy leading the weekend, and it was, just the guys. Well, the following year in '05, I brought the book with me and started reading it. And this guy was talking to me, at least I was connecting with what he was sharing around men's spirituality and around how there just aren't any programs or journeys designed for men, and we've lost a lot of, especially around initiation. How do we transition from boyhood to manhood in a healthy way? So I got home and, I started, searching on the internet, who is this Richard Rohr guy? What's this guy about? And found out that he was doing a book tour down in Southern California. And so I rode down to Southern California for a weekend and heard him speak. And he talked about this men's rites of passage experience. Got to talk to him a little bit afterwards and came home and started noodling around. What's this men's rites of passage thing? And, and I got on the wait list. It really was calling to me to kind of try to find a way to fill some emptiness that my other experiences just weren't addressing.
Can you tell us which book that was that you read?
It was The Wild Man's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
The current form is titled From Wild Man to Wise Man, the current edition that's out. But it really, really spoke to me.
Thinking back to the day that you sort of arrived at the rites, or maybe even on the journey to New Mexico, but as you went in, was there something that you were hoping to get from the rites?
There was. And I took a 3-day motorcycle ride to get from my house to the rites, to the site. And I had 2 intentions during those 3 days. The first was to do my very best to show up with an open mind and an open heart, or what Richard calls a beginner's mind, trying to kind of set aside any expectations of what I want to get out of this, right? Specifically, but to be open. And then my second intention was I wanted to get everything out of it that I could, whatever was offered, right? And to be all in and to put my trust in the team and the experience so that I could get all the juice there was to get.
Were you carrying any fear with you into the rites?
Not really. I'm a little bit open to new experiences. I tend to be. So I didn't have a lot of trepidation.
And when you left the rites, after the rites had ended, immediately after, as you're driving home, how were you feeling? What was going on for you then?
I was overwhelmed when I left, trying to kind of sort out, right? So the thinking mind took over as soon as I hit the road, right? But again, I had 3 days journey home in solitude to really start organizing and unpacking, and I'm still doing it.
What changed? I know it's been 20 years, but maybe there were some immediate changes in your life, but what has changed practically, relationally, spiritually since you made your rites?
Boy, a lot has changed in the last 20 years, but I am much more grounded as a human being than I was prior to the rites. It is far more difficult to knock me off my center than it used to be. And I feel this is incredibly important work and experience for all men that we need to do if we want to become healthy, authentic, and contributing in a positive way to the world and people around us.
When you went to the rites, was there anyone that you told prior to going to the rites that you were going to the rites, and what were those conversations like?
Good question. I don't really have any explicit memories there to share.
Yeah, no worries. But after the rites, did you tell other people about your experience there? Were you able to talk about it?
I did indeed. I was able to talk about it. The year after my experience with the rites, Richard Rohr came and did a weekend retreat right near me. And there was a handful of us, maybe 10 of us, that came to that weekend retreat that had all made our rites in the last couple of years. And we actually sat down with Father Richard and said, we want to start up a Northern California chapter of what was at the time called Males. And that's what, that's been kind of my follow-up ever since, is continuing with that group.
Was the The transformational aspect of the rites, was that immediately apparent to you right after the rites, or was that something that kind of settled on you over time?
I would say both. There was like immediate impact of kind of I've found a way to express and describe who I am as a person, as a man, and it's evolved over the last 20 years as well, continuing to go deeper and have just continuing to grow. We're doing my best.
Yeah, now I imagine, since it's been 20 years since you made the rites, it's not only the rites that has contributed to this, but I'm going to ask you, did that experience and what you've learned since change your understanding of masculinity, initiation, and really what it means to be a man?
Completely, completely. As a child, I had some experiences with the Y Indian Guides. I had experience with Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and those were great programs. Definitely gave skills and some orientation around male companionship and teamwork. But the rites really kind of moved me into an adult space, more of a grown up understanding and footing, I would say.
And we were talking before we started recording here that 2010 was the first year that the rites were offered in Northern California, where you're from. And so your chapter's been doing men's rites of passage every couple of years since then, and you've been involved. How was your rites experience informed? How did that inform your ongoing participation in the MROP and offering that to other men?
I would say it was really my experience at Ghost Ranch was sort of the driving energy behind my staying involved and wanting to be part of the experience of other men having a similar experience and maybe having their eyes open to some aspect of themselves or their own history or their own spirituality that they had not seen before.
You're doing a rites of passage this May. Is it 13th through the 17th?
It is in Northern California.
Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit more of that, but why you're doing it, extend an invitation to somebody who might be listening. Why should they come, or why would this be a good experience for them?
These aren't my original thoughts, but I experienced them, right? Richard Rohr has written about them that, when we get to a point in life as men, at least in my experience and many of the other brothers, that host and promote this work, is there comes a point when winning doesn't teach you anything. And there's a lot more to life than going to work, doing your day job, providing, financially for your family, and then cracking open a beer and watching sports on television. Right? There's a much deeper and richer journey to being a man, contributing not just financially, but spiritually to family, friends, all the people you come into contact with.
If a man is having a hard time discerning whether or not to come to the rites, what kind of counsel or advice would you give him?
Well, the advice I would give myself, and so I would share with other men, is if you're considering this journey, but you have some trepidation, you're not sure about it, lean into it. There's transformation takes place in a different kind of space. And so if your logical mind is saying, yeah, but maybe it'll be scary, it's time to instruct the logical mind to sit down for a few minutes and chill.
That's great. This has been very helpful, and I really appreciate your time. I really just have kind of one more question for you. And Rich, obviously your rites led to a 2-decade involvement with the men's work and Illuman. What could you share, or what would you like to say to men about the community and what your experience has been like in helping to create that community?
So I don't know who the origin of this is, but there's a phrase out there that, men sharpen men, right? As iron sharpens iron. And there really is in my experience, a pathway of growth into becoming a mature, masculine man that can only happen in the company of other men and in the accompaniment shoulder to shoulder with other men. I cherish and love my spouse and family and children and grandchildren, but there is an aspect of healthy malehood that can only be expressed and nurtured in the company of a group of other men.
Well said. Brother, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I love you, brother, and I want to thank you for your honesty, your courage, and for giving us a peek into your MROP experience and how that's changed your life.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for the invitation, Brian. Always glad to talk about Illuman and men doing their inner work to make a difference in the world.
For those listening who are now feeling a tug in their own soul and are curious to learn more, allow me to share a bit about the history of these rites. The men's rites of passage was originally developed by Father Richard Rohr and was first offered at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico in 1996. While it was supported for many years by the Center for Action and Contemplation, since 2012, Illuman has been the steward of this work, preserving and adapting the rites for men all over the world. To learn more about the history and the theology behind this work, I highly recommend reading Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. If you are ready to make your rites, there are 4 opportunities in the United States and another in the United Kingdom in 2026. The first is in Northern California, May 13th through the 17th. The second in the United Kingdom, July 22nd through the 26th. And in Illinois, August 12th through the 16th. There's one on the East Coast in New Jersey, September 16th through the 20th. And the final one of the year is in Texas, which is in MROP and Umbrales, our Spanish language rites, September 30th through October 4th. You can find details and registration information at illuman.org/MROP or illuman.org/events. Additionally, mark your calendars for Awaken, the annual national gathering of Illuman, taking place November 5th through the 8th in New Mexico. You can find more at illuman.org/awaken. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, Choosing Presence. If today's conversation moved you, I encourage you to bring more intentionality into your daily life. Download the Practicing Presence app for free at choosingpresence.org/app. It's a simple but profound way to stay connected to the journey we've discussed today. Thank you for listening to Follow Me to the MROP. Until next time, brothers, stay present.